We are 1 month from the MLB Draft. Justin's not here. It seems like the perfect time for a mock draft edition of Locked On Guardians.
You are Locked On Guardians, your daily podcast on the Cleveland Guardians. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you and welcome to the show today. I am Jeff Ellis, one of your two co-hosts of Locked On Guardians. As I said, Justin's not here, so it is a solo show this evening. I want to do a quick shout out to today's sponsor, Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. For those who don't know me, I am Jeff Ellis, one of the OG, one of the original hosts of the Locked On MLB side of things. Before that, I was a lead draft and prospect analyst nationally for Scout and 24/7. Placed Kylie McDaniel at Scout. You might have heard of him. And before that, I was your fifth favorite blogger at every Cleveland sports blog that's ever existed, as well as an occasional contributor to Prospects Live. As I said at the start, we're going to have fun. We're going to do a mock draft edition. I wanted to give a quick shout out to many of our everydayers like Siege with me, Mutant Managin, John. Yesterday's show, after a loss, I know it's hard for a lot of people, so I appreciate everyone joining in, coming in when there's a loss. For those, again, who are not familiar with the draft, Cleveland has the first overall pick for the first time ever. Their best second overall pick is Greg Swindell. Don't look at the Greg Swindell trade, though. That's a terrible one in franchise history. But outside of Swindell, it's not been super successful for Cleveland. If you look at, Manning and his career being more successful as an announcer than a player, it kind of speaks to him being maybe the second best one they've taken. For those who do not know, I think my favorite sad fact is for a long time it was AL, NL, AL, AL, NL. Cleveland 2 years in a row had the worst record in the AL. And I believe that was the year. One year they took Swindell. The next year they took Mark Lewis. In between, they had that infamous, I'll probably get it wrong, year where they made the Sports Illustrated cover. And, because they had a great end to that year. And everyone thought they'd be good, and then they were terrible. The end to that year, if they had just been terrible, first overall pick in between Ken Griffey Jr. So, yeah, not ideal. But how do I go about this? I do listen to teams some. I know MLB.com had a mock go out the day before this. I had the top two picks ruined for me, but I refused to look at the rest of it because I did not want that information. I just want to be able to sit back and do a mock. I look a lot at history. Right now, I would argue 90% of the smoke is exactly that, smoke. Don't let yourself get got. Without further ado, let's dive in, pick by pick. Travis Bazzana is still the guy to me. I think it has gotten to the point with me where the gap between Bazzana and Condon is larger than the gap between Condon and Burns. I'll explain a little bit more of that in a bit. Bazzana is just super safe. I think he's going to be an above average regular. For people who don't like him, they say, oh, there's no power. He had the largest increase in 90th percentile exit velocity this past year amongst any hitter that is a guy who has a first or second round grade that I was going through and looking at this for. He sat there and focused on his hitting to hit for more power. We can sit there and say, oh, he went and he worked on his launch angles. He worked on his strength. He worked at all of this. And that's on top of setting every record, basically, at one of the top developmental programs for baseball in the entire country. He's done it all. He has that work ethic that he never quits. And it's got to be him. There is always the rumor that they are going to go, quote unquote, cheap. And I want to explain this very quickly here. If you go under slot, it's not because you're cheap. It's so you can spend that money later. This team has always gone over. They've paid a penalty every single year outside of 2020 since the new system went in. So they've paid over their slotted amount. They're not going to go cheap, as people like to report. It would be trying to pay more for other talent later in the draft. My two issues with this are twofold. One, you're not going to get great value at 36 and 48 this year. It's just, this is a kind of weak top 70 or so compared to most years. The depth is there. So if you're saving money, it's more for like day three or hoping you can pull someone down like the Brewers did with Cooper Pratt. And then I think 3 or 4 prep arms on day 3. That's what you want to do. I don't think you need to save a ton of money to get there. And the two times they really went over under slot and did this strategy. One is 2020. That entire draft is terrible for everyone. With Carson Tucker, hey, next time you see him, that'll be the first time I see him. I feel like he's just kind of been hurt, or when he's had those opportunities, really ineffective. That hasn't worked well. And 2012, when they took Naquin, listen, Naquin got to the big leagues. That works out. But all the guys they saved that money for, it was really bad. Almost none of them got to Double-A. Kieran Lovegrove was probably the best of the group, but guys like Dylan Howard's probably the worst second-round pick in franchise history. Devon McClure ended up going back to Arkansas to play football. I was really excited for that draft and ended up being terrible. So I don't think you want to take that approach. Just when you have a chance at one, you got to take the elite talent and move on. And yes, I'm going to spend more time on Cleveland's pick because this is Locked On Guardians. Yes, I am also the draft analyst for the entire network, but this is going out on Locked On Guardians. So historically, he fits all of their things, in terms of the work ethic, in terms of the knowledge of analytics, in terms of dominating the Cape. They drafted Chase DeLauder after a bad junior year because of how good he was on the Cape. That stuff matters. We could find 1 to 2 examples of guys who are not great on the Cape, even in small samples, and had good pro careers. It is such a red check mark that it does scare teams off. So I have my little Speaking of Prospects Live shout out. Since I do work the mock draft simulator, I'm running that over here, so I don't miss any picks this year. With the Reds, listen, I was going to get crazy. I was thinking about this morning. I'm going to have Chase Burns to the Reds. Now, I know this goes against type, and I know it's also what MLB.com did, so that's annoying. But I was thinking about this one. He was at the game on, was it Monday? Or was it no, it was Tuesday. There was no game Monday. Where he was sitting on the red side of things. They took a Wake Forest pitcher a year ago. They have been a little bit more pitcher focused. And there are some concerns right now when I talk with people about Charlie Condon's home road data, as well as his conference, non-conference data. The slowdown when he hit better levels of competition, he still performed well, but there is concerns. There are things coming out. I do think that brings him down. And in addition, he's a first baseman first. The history, there's so many guys who are athletic first basemen who they're going to be able to move and play another position and never do. Because here's the problem with this is often those guys, their bat is going to get them promoted before their glove will. So if you're going to have him go play another position, that might slow him down. So it's kind of a catch-22. He does have the small Cape sample that is not great, but in fairness to him, he has a great Northwood sample. So we know it's not the wood bats. It's just, but I can't find anyone with even his level of poor performance outside of Pete Alonso, who had a long season. Alonso, it was a weird year playing at that Orleans Stadium. So Condon is in a weird situation where right now he's getting dinged, I think, a little bit more. Just more concerns are arising. And right first baseman, which is what he is, the history on that has been pretty horrific for college players. Like right now, he's a right first baseman. Spencer Torkelson is a recent example. It's one of the worst demographics to draft, and that's the other thing that I think is going to maybe cause him to slip a little, but not far, because the Rockies like power. And the funny thing is, his best outcome, if you're doing comps, it's probably Chris Bryant. So hey, we know the Rockies went out and signed Chris Bryant. I think he is a pretty good bet to go there. Him, Burns or Jack could all be in play at that pick. Feels like those are the 3 guys, though, that have kind of separated themselves a little bit from the crew. With Oakland at 4, it gets a little bit interesting. They went safe a year ago. They went super duper safe with their first round pick. And then they went for some bloodlines with their prep players and those other picks. I don't know if there's really a bloodlines pick that I want to grab at this point in the draft. But if you're going to go with the safest player, I think it's actually Nick Kurtz and not JJ Weatherholt. I know Weatherholt has a lot of fans, but man, Kurtz's profile as a first baseman looks incredibly good. Like when you're looking at chase rate, you're looking at contact rate, you're looking at home run rate. He is, outside of Bazana, probably the safest hitter in this draft. I feel that, yes, the high walk rate does have some concerns of passivity, but if we're looking for a safe pick, I think Nick Kurtz is that guy, and he's probably close to Condon in athletic profile. So yeah, and he's a lefty, which is a little bit less concerns with another first base type. I know everyone wants right-handed bats, but here's the thing. If a right-handed bat underperforms a little, then you get a weak side platoon. If a left-handed bat underperforms a little, you still get an everyday starter for the most part. That is why that is kind of a big deal. And then with the White Sox here, this is where we start to hear some rumors of prep talent. They have gone prep in, a few recent drafts. Last year, they did go college. Jacob Gonzalez took the sliding talent. I don't know if I have a great feel for the White Sox right now. Does anyone have a great feel about the White Sox? I don't think so. But when we're looking at everything that is occurring, when I'm considering like what guys are rising, which guys are sliding, it feels like this is a good place for a prep player. And I'm going to go with the ceiling of Connor Griffin. Bryce Renier is 19. He's a little bit older. I think Griffin being a reclassified guy. Listen, I would advocate never taking a high school player in the top 10. That's just me. I did the research and showed that like you have a better chance of finding a star college player than a good high school player over the last 20 years of the draft in the top 10. So it's not what I would take, but the White Sox are a team that lean more prep. And I think it makes sense with this pick here. We have a lot of picks to get into. So stay around, stay tuned, and I will at least discuss 36 and 48 in segment 3. So you want to be here for that. On today's Locked On Guardians. And I want to start with the quick shout out to our sponsor over here, which is Tax Network USA. Here at Locked On Guardians, we pride ourselves on getting you the latest news for your team, whether it's the offseason, the draft, spring training, or playoffs. It's year-round. You know what else is year-round? Collection season. Not quite as fun. But just because tax season is over doesn't mean the IRS will stop coming after you for unfiled taxes. The IRS can garnish your wages, levy your bank accounts, and even seize your property. Don't let the IRS target you. Let licensed professionals and tax experts at Tax Network USA go to bat for you. I've had 2 tax issues in my life. One, my dad decided not to pay taxes for a few years, and trying to help him through that was just nerve and stress and all the bad things. And, I had to go to an accountant and figure that out, and had to pay significantly to get him help. Another one was something smaller. We're in Ohio. I taught in Rittman, lived in Fairlawn, and they had different tax rates. So Fairlawn came after me for not paying taxes that I didn't know. It wasn't that I was avoiding the taxes. I was like, oh, it comes out of my paycheck. So, you always want to be prepared. You always want to be knowledgeable, because sometimes even when you're doing the right things, you might be doing something you weren't supposed to do. With over 14 years experience and an A+ rating by the Better Business Bureau, Tax Network USA has saved their clients over $1 billion in tax debt. Whether you owe taxes, have complicated matters, require tax planning, or finally hit that parlay this season and need help correctly filing, call 1-800-549-1000 or visit tnusa.com/lockedon. See the link in this episode's description below for more information. So we are back at it. There's that. So if you're a longtime listener, you know that that is a constant of my coming back from breaks. I want to remind you with the Guardian series this weekend to check out all the games. You can listen over on Sirius XM radio. Just type Guardians in. So, I didn't actually click on the so Kansas City Royals. Another team that's interesting because they've been heavy on prep. And they've also, though, like some underslot deals. Last year, Blake Mitchell was a bit of an underslot. Gavin Cross, though, the year before was a college performer. It's just last year's draft, they went prep early. And it's hard to get a good feel on them as an organization. Would they go with another prep player here? Who would be the guy who jumps up? Because this is kind of that eye of the beholder tier, right? It's like, which guy do you like? Which is the player who's going to perform well? And when I look at the Royals, there's that part of me that thinks prep again, just because that's what's on the board. But I don't know. It's really one of those things. They're always a very hard team for me to gauge overall. And what I kind of lean towards here, honestly, is Hagen Smith. And I've leaned to him in multiple mock drafts before, because the other consistent thing with Kansas City has been pitching. Now, the last 2 years, they didn't go pitching, but overall, this is a team that has kind of understood the need to develop pitching and appears to be doing better with that. Fixing someone like Cole Ragans, getting another elite lefty, I think, is valuable here. And you look at the other players in this group, there is Jack, but he has concerns. Like the fact that he swings at everything is an issue. Montgomery, it's a short-term injury. Weatherholt, it's a short-term injury. Yusevich could be in play. Tibbs could be in play. And then Rainier is the high school kid. It's going to be interesting to see who goes. But right now, I think Hagen Smith makes a lot of sense. He's one of the youngest players in the junior class. And one of my number one rules is look for guys who are performing when they have no business performing. And that would be, in this situation, that'd be Hagen Smith because pitching has been so bad. Cardinals here at 7. I think Braden Montgomery makes a lot of sense. And some what Cardinals fans want is another tooled up outfielder. But when you look at what they've done over the years, it is taking like tooled up guys with some power. Chase Davis, Jordan Walker, Nolan Gorman, Joshua Baez. Like they like tooled up outfielders with power. Montgomery, listen, he's not the fastest guy. He is not a center fielder. He's going to be a right fielder. He's got a heck of an arm. But he's a linebacker. Like just because someone is a linebacker doesn't mean that he's not athletic. It just means he's not the best with foot speed. The injury isn't ideal. The swing and miss isn't ideal. But at this point, there are people who think Montgomery is one of the top 3 talents in this class. I think he is just fits what we've seen them go for, which is guys with power potential. They like to go with that. Or, I wouldn't be shocked by Trey Yusevich there either, if I'm being honest. Brings us to the Angels. I'm going to stick with Weatherholt. At various times, I've heard Weatherholt connected to them. I also heard, though, that maybe they don't want guys who already have been hurt. They're a little concerned. But Weatherholt played really well when he came back from his injury and feels like a good value at this point in the draft. He's not that dissimilar from Bazana in some respects. So I think that's a really good value. For the Pirates, I'm going to give him Jack. Is it a surprise he's still there? Yes and no. I'm very curious to see where he gets drafted because there is a degree of writer inflation that I'm not always hearing when I talk to people who are scouts. Because you can't change swing profile. You just can't. Like for a college player, you're not going to get them to swing less. You can do small things here or there, but you can't drastically change a swing for a kid who has already gone through college. Often what they are is what they are, and Jack's swing profile is he swings at everything. Also at his size, he's likely first base only. So you're drafting a first baseman who the number one reason prospects fail is contact issues. Now, he actually makes contact a lot, but it is less contact decisions and more swing decisions is why prospects fail. High K rate, inability to make contact, low walks, things like that. And that's Jack. So you're betting on him being a unicorn to be successful, which maybe he is. Maybe he has that Vlad Guerrero type of being able to swing and make contact with everything. I would never comp anyone to Vlad Guerrero ever myself. We haven't seen too many other guys. There are the people like Salvador Perez can kind of get away with that. Louis Robert can kind of get away with that. But you're kind of hoping he's going to be in that silo. For the Pirates, it's a ceiling pick, right? Like they have a lot of interesting guys. I'm not sure any of them have a big power upside. So it fits kind of an organizational need, not that you draft for need. But he feels like a player that, while I am not as high as the field, I think he makes a lot of sense there. And then you get Washington, which not ideal because Washington Nationals, a number one thing is that they are the team that typically drafts a sliding talent, someone who maybe had a rough year, but was more valuable the season before. They have taken a lot of guys who, like Elijah Green, for instance, he was viewed as potentially 1-1, slid to 5. Didn't kind of when everyone else elevated, he was down a little bit. Think of Seth Romero comes to mind. Cade Cavalli due to injury. They took a lot of guys. Was it Mason Denneberg? Injuries. In this case, I don't know if there's that guy that stands out to me. So instead, I'm going to go with, a year ago, when you look at them taking Cruz, it was just taking a talented player who should be quick to the majors. It feels to me, I could be wrong. I think a lot of people are really warming to James Tibbs like I have. And I think Tibbs is a guy who should be quick to the majors, has performed really well, has fantastic statistics. I could see him as high as 6 to Kansas City. If they decide they want to do the underslot game, he's that guy who a team is going to draft and maybe pay like $6 million and then have a little bit more money to spend around. But I also think he is a legit top 10 talent in this class. Tigers, a year ago, they went back-to-back prep. Bryce Renier is on the board. Some people view him as the top prep player in this class. He is older at 19, but I think, if you look at them and being more prep heavy, he stands out. Boston, Trey Yusevich on the board. I think that is, again, a very easy selection because of, the front office coming from the Cubs. That Cubs front office has been pretty conservative early on. Yusevich, to many people, is a top 10 talent. He's sitting there 12. I could see him. I would not be shocked if he ended up being the number 2 pitcher off the board ahead of Smith either. Just makes a lot of sense. It is a solid value. Giants, last 3 years, they have taken two-way guys. So where's Benj on here? Carson Benj, I think, is a guy who might be the best pure two-way prospect amongst the college players. I know most people talk about Jack, and Jack's stuff is amazing. If he focused on pitching, I think he could do it, but I don't think he has the ability to commit the time that is going to be necessary. And honestly, Benj doesn't either. But he was a pretty effective pitcher. You can run him out there as both and then see what happens with him. I mean, I think he's going to be an outfielder, but he's had a really good year. He's been a late riser. He did everything he needed to get to that point. And the Cubs, another team we've talked about, maybe a little bit more conservative. Sitting there with Cam Smith, would they consider him? You're kind of looking at that grouping of guys at this point in the draft, the Cam Smiths, the Ryan Walsh-Schmidts, all of those types. Listen, we'll talk about the Cubs in a second on today's Locked On Guardians. I know Justin is now really sad to be here because it's a double Game Time episode. I haven't done a Game Time ad in months because Justin loves Game Time. I have 2 small kids at home. I don't get to go to a lot of events, but every single event Justin goes to, he is on the Game Time app. He uses it for concerts. He uses it for comedy shows. He uses it to go to the Guardians games. Like, he is always using Game Time. It was not a company he knew about before he came here, before he started being a host. And once he started advertising, he started checking it out, and he loves it. Listen, you can look at your seat. My first baseball game ever was behind a pillar at Old Municipal. Don't have to worry about that with Game Time. They'll show you where your seat is. You can make sure that it is exactly what you want to see and that it is a good seat for you. And they have a guaranteed, all these fantastic. They have flash deals, zone deals, all in pricing. Talked about the seat views, lowest price guarantee, or you'll get 110% credit for the difference. So download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONMLB. Or I'm here actually saying Locked On College for $20 off your first purchase. Try MLB first, then try college. But download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code either Locked On MLB or Locked On College for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code spelled LOCKEDON MLB for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Again, want to remind you to check out all the fun on Sirius XM Radio. Who knows, with Hamilton, enjoying a few more breaks this year, who you might get to hear. I've quite enjoyed Pat Tabler on the various broadcasts. Cubs, I think at this point, Cam Smith stands out to me. I think, yes, they took Matt Shaw a year ago, but I also think Matt Shaw can maybe play second. Big Matt Shaw guy a year ago. I had him 5th overall in last year's draft. Cam Smith did everything. He excelled in the Cape. He was one of those guys. Yeah, so freshman year, dominated the Cape, and then from there, he just used it as a springboard, and that's a fun Florida State team. They're still playing. You can check them out. Cam Smith, James Tibbs' favorite, Jamie Ferrier. He's got a lot of swing and miss. That dude's got a lot of power. I really think that they are a lot of fun. Check out Florida State. Not to mention that Jamie Arnold might be actually the best pitcher in the country right now. Not draft eligible this year. So Cam Smith to the Cubs. Seattle. They were the most conservative team, and then they were the most prep team. I'm going to go ahead and give him Slade Caldwell here. If Caldwell was 6'1" instead of 5'9", he would be in the debate for the top prep guy in this class. He is super athletic, fun size. Some people think he is sub 5'9", but he is just an awesome performer. I think he's the type of guy that, if you like Jet Williams, you like Slade Caldwell. And if you know me, I was a Jet Williams fan before the Mets took him. Miami Marlins are up, front office from the Rays, right? So we're looking at kind of athletic profiles in recent years and or power. And, at this point in the draft, like we're kind of in, I don't necessarily want to say tier 2 of hitters, but I think the guy I kind of like here, and I think I have to type him in again because unfortunately I love Prospects Live, but they are not as high on Christian Moore as I am. And Christian Moore, the data on him is really solid. Up the middle guy, good power, power over hit, but he has just been he's performed well. He doesn't chase too much. There's good athletic profile. Tennessee's all-time home run leader, I want to say as well. And I think he is one of those guys who is moving up board. So if you're looking for power, it's not often you can find his type of power in the middle, as an up the middle talent. So I think he makes a lot of sense. Milwaukee Brewers, Ryan Waldschmidt is still there, and he feels like such a Brewers type of guy. Like, again, really clean profile, high level performance in the SEC. He has done it all year. So I like him right there. Ryan Waldschmidt, I think, is one of those guys who is rising late. I'm probably a little low on Seaver King. Everything is said about Jack with the swing and miss and swinging a little too much, and being afraid that that's going to be something that's taken advantage of. You can say for Seaver King as well. There's a lot of great tools, and he's probably a center fielder, and there's value in that. And the other thing with the Rays is they do like up the middle guys, and he does have some pop. So I think he is a interesting gamble at this point in the draft for Tampa. I also like kind of Brody Breck there, who I think is kind of rising a little after showing some nice things late. Now the problem is I gave the Brewers, a very Brewers type of talent where it's like, okay, so who's left? Who could make sense? We know that Stern's coming from the Brewers. He kind of likes a safer, cleaner profile. And unfortunately, I'm not loving the safer, cleaner profiles left at this point in the draft. There's some interesting pitchers I do like, but the other thing is going up the middle, and there are people who really like Kalen Culpepper. I heard talk that there are teams considering him the upper half of the first round. I am not as sold on him as a shortstop, but there are people who believe in him. There's a lot of things there, and I think Culpepper could be a name to watch. Toronto Blue Jays. They have had some prep recently. I think Cam Caminiti being a sliding arm. This is also an organization that's gone with a lot of bloodlines through the years. You got bloodlines. You got a sliding talent. You have a guy who favors youth models. Boom. Twins. Walker Jenkins last year. They're another team that goes for power. I think Vance Honeycutt being on the board, maybe they take the gamble. They have the depth in their system to, there's a world where Vance Honeycutt is Bradley Zimmer, and there's a world where he is plus Michael A. Taylor. So it's how it goes. I mean, he had the worst increase in chase rate this year in college baseball by like 13%. He was trying to do too much. So he had an awesome freshman year. Then last year, he tried to cut back on his strikeouts and hit for a lot less power. This year, he showed that power again. He's a 60 to 70 grade defender in center, and he's got raw 70 power. Can he hit enough to get there? I think he's an interesting gamble for the Twins. I'm really kind of shocked by the pitching I have available at this point because it's not a great pitching draft. But you have Baltimore, who has not drafted pitching either recently. So instead of that, you're looking for some power potential, some guys who can do some interesting things with the bat, who show some power, really stand out at this point in the draft to me. And I kind of feel like the other way to go is, I feel like Walker Janik has decent power, but it's more the positional value. Could make sense right there to Baltimore. Dodgers, Theo Gillen just feels like, I'm sorry, not Theo Gillen does make sense there, but Kellen Lindsey is just a guy who's very similar to who they drafted a year ago. You're talking about one of the fastest guys in class. Braves, Brody Brecht on the board. That's just too good of a value. It's easy. Same reason they liked Waldrip a year ago. It's traits over performance, and Iowa had 3 really good arms, and none of them showed exceptional development this year. So good for the Braves, I guess. Theo Gillen, there's that tooled up guy that they like to take in San Diego. Now the Yankees are sitting here with the way this board fell. and I'm going to give them Syngente, the switch pitcher, who, if I can I spell his name correctly, that becomes more there we go, Jurangelo. Syngente, he might be more righty than a switch guy. He's undersized, but the Yankees go for college performance. He's performed well this year. He is a guy that is kind of getting a late bump on boards and the like. He's an interesting prospect. He's going to be a lot of fun to talk about, but he's probably more fun to talk about than what he really is in terms of pitching. But I think he is I just think he makes sense for them in terms of just being an interesting ceiling play. Phillies, which pitcher do I like? Because it feels like, they'll go for, it's going to be a prep talent. So it's like, there's a lot of guys on the board. Cash Mayfield, the lefty from Oak City, a lot of people love. He's almost 19 and a half, so he is older. But if they're going to go with a high school player, that's him or William Schmidt would be the top ones on the board. You get to the Houston Astros, and you're more than likely looking for a college performer at this point. Malcolm Moore had a nice rebound late. How much do you believe in him? But the guy that's there, they kind of sometimes go for name value, Tommy White, right? Like Tommy White is a name value, has some power. That guy that they could maybe put in the lower minors and help stick up his value if they try to flip him in the air. Arizona went very college heavy last year as well, like a lot of teams have in recent years. I think one of the things that you could take away from them over the past few years is that they would potentially be looking for like a college performer up the middle position. I mentioned Malcolm Moore. He's going to go off around here. It's either him or Caleb Lomavita. I'm going to go with Lomavita over Moore because even though, again, a guy with huge amounts of swing and miss, I do know that he has many fans in the league. Quickly, the Rangers, just to finish this off. I know I said I'd have some time. Maybe I'll do a bonus episode. But for the Rangers here, if you're looking for just an interesting ceiling talent, PJ Morlando is a guy who some people thought would be the first player off the board. You are always my first people off the board. Thank you all for joining us, rating and reviewing, downloading. It helps. I appreciate all members of Locked On Guardians team, family, and go Guardians, go.